Good Shabbos and good Yontif. Tonight we're starting 3 days combined of Shabbos, Parshas Bamidbar, and Shavuos, which is on Sunday and Monday. And Shavuos is really a holiday which is forgotten by many people, many Jews around the world. And the reason is that Shavuos has no special mitzvahs associated with it. It's 1 day in Israel, 2 days in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel. So it's a short holiday, and there's nothing special associated. We don't sit in a sukkah, no lulav, no esrog, no chametz, no matzah. It's just a relaxing holiday. Of course, we have a tradition to stay up and learn Torah the whole night of the Shavuos night, because we have a tradition that the Torah was given on Shavuos. But when you read the Torah, all it says is that we count 49 days, and the 50th day after the second day of Pesach is the holiday of Shavuos, and there was a special offering brought in the temple, but of course that's not something that we have today. So what is really the meaning of Shavuos? And some of the commentaries, the Ramban specifically, says that Shavuos is almost like the last days of Pesach, because we have these 49 days in between, and just like Sukkot has 7 days, there's a Chol HaMoed, there's days in between the first days and the last days. And the last day is Shmini Atzeres, which is really a separate Yontif. We have Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, and it's the end of the holiday. So too do we have the end of Pesach being 50 days later. So instead of 7 days of the holiday, it's 7 times 7. And then that's one long Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of the holiday. And then we end with Shavuos. So he's making a connection, between Shavuos and Pesach. And I would like to say that it's a similar connection that we have between Shmini Atzeres, the last days of Sukkot, and Sukkot. Why is that? Shmini Atzeres also has no mitzvahs associated. Again, we do Simchas Torah on the last days, but that's a tradition that's not really anything mentioned. It's not mentioned in the Torah. So what's the significance of Shmini Atzeres? So according to many commentaries, during the Yom Tov of Sukkot, we bring, in the temple times, 70 offerings. And the 70 offerings are similar or parallel to the 70 nations that exist in the world. Though we have a tradition, there's 70 nations. Of course, we know there's many more nations and languages, but that's our tradition. And those 70 nations we celebrate on Sukkot. So we're not just having a Jewish holiday, it's a Jewish holiday, but we understand the Jewish holiday as one which represents universal ideals and trying to include all the nations of the world. Shmini Atzeres is only one specific offering brought on that day. Why? Because that day it says that it's Atzeres Tielachem, you should stay back. That the Jewish people are now developing a personal relationship with God as a nation outside of their representation of mankind in general and the universal ideas which are associated with Sukkot. So we go from the universal to the particular, but the particular as far as being a Jewish people and our relationship with God. The same thing could be said about Shavuos, but except on a different level. Pesach is not a holiday which represents the nations of the world, but rather it's the birth of the Jewish nation, the birth of the Jewish people. We have the Karban Pesach, the offering which is brought on Pesach, which we sit and eat together with a family. You're supposed to have a family or an extended family eating that offering. And we have many mitzvahs which are associated with that holiday. So the different mitzvahs, the fulfillment of these commandments, are ones which bring us together and unite us. And the same thing could be said about the Sukkot. Sukkot, we sit in the sukkah, we have a lulav and an esrog. There's many things which create a sense of community. And on Pesach, we also have a sense of community. And in our development of our own sense of self and our spirituality and our relationship to God, we have different ways of relating to God and different ways of relating to the Torah. One way is we act as conformists. We conform to the norms of our society. And therefore, the way we conform to those norms is the following of the commandments, and we do what everyone else does. Whether we like it or not, that's what we do. It's not really ourselves developing as individuals, but as ourselves being part of the klal, of being a part of the tzibur, of the community, being part of the larger group. And in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, we associate the holiday of Pesach with Knesset Yisrael. It's the Jewish people, the congregation of Israel. But Shavuot is associated with Bina, with understanding. And why is that? As I said previously, we understand, we have a tradition that Shavuot is the time when the Jews accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai. So although it's a collective reception of the Torah on Mount Sinai, really what we're hearing is the Torah, the words of the Torah, the ideas of the Torah. And it's not just the mitzvahs, it's the understanding, and that's what the Bina is. The Bina is the understanding of the Torah. It's how each one of us as individuals hears and perceives the Torah. And just like, a rainbow might have many different colors, but really it's all coming from its refracted light. It's pure white light, which is refracted into many different colors. And the same thing is with the Jewish people. We're one people, but then when it gets refracted, we're many different colors. We have many different perceptions. And even though we're all hearing the word of God, we're all reading the same Torah, what I hear might be different from what you hear. How I perceive it might be different from how you perceive it. And therefore, it's an individual relationship to God. It's no longer conformity. It's no longer being part of the community and doing what everyone else does. No, we have to make sure we create our own path to God, to spirituality, to Torah, to mitzvahs, to morals and ethics. We have to develop ourselves. We have to be able to stand and say to ourselves, no, we are doing this because we want to have a relationship with God. We want to have an idea and the principles of the Torah understood by us and lived by us. And that, I think, is the meaning of Shavuot. So it's sometimes forgotten because it's not associated with sort of these grand parties and all of these different mitzvahs. It's a time for us to reflect on our own personal path to the Torah and to God. Good Shabbos and good Yom Tov.